Welcome everybody to Tomes and Tales, Mischief of Mice, with Joe the Barbarian. Today, the game. Oh boy, I am just all over the place. Hey everybody! Today we're going to be talking about Joe the Barbarian, which was picked by Steve, the mice person. But let me do a quick intro on everybody. We have here Kashka. We have
Hello.
Callisto.
Hello.
We have Helen.
Hello.
And we have Lilac SC.
Hello.
All right, and back to Steve, who will be giving us a little bit of a synopsis intro to Joe the Barbarian. Steve.
Synopsis, either that or brain activity. I will admit that there is some brain activity going on, despite what I say.
It's just
All
not
right,
in my
so
brain.
all right, so this is Joe the Barbarian by Grant Morrison and Sean Murphy. Grant Morrison being the writer and Sean Murphy being the artist. Yeah, so basically the overall gist is that it's about a boy trying to get to the kitchen. Except for he's a type 1 diabetic, and he actually hallucinates a very, very intricate world full of toys and adventures and all sorts of things. It's a pretty interesting adventure. So a little bit of history on Grant Morrison. He's actually been around for quite a while. He goes back as far as the 80s. He did a lot of British indie titles, including something I thought was actually pretty interesting. Was there's anti-Margaret Thatcher comic called Saint Swithin's Day. I probably got that completely wrong, but
No, that's right.
yeah, fantastic. I got it. Nailed it. Yeah. There were. He also has done an epic amount of DC and Marvel stuff. That's probably what most people know him from. The last thing I read by him was an independent comic called We Three, which, if you like animals, do not read it. It's spoilers. There's lots of death. So yeah, and also another one called Sea Guy, which I have not read at all. But yeah, he has just an epic history, and he's still going strong. Sean Murphy has a decent history as well. Also done a lot of bit of DC and Marvel, back and forth, a little bit of Star Wars. And funny enough, has also done political stuff. But back in the 2008 election, he came up with something that was a little bit about politics, religion, and the media, called Punk Rock Jesus, which sounded really interesting. I thought, yeah, that might be pretty cool to read at some point. Oh, and another random fact, actually, is that there's a film adaptation for this in the works. But since I am not an IMDb Pro member, I cannot tell you anything more about it other than the fact that it's being made by Thunder Road Pictures, which apparently did the Clash of Titans
Nice.
remake, the more recent one. Yes, no, not the original.
Yeah.
I'm afraid. So yeah, that's pretty much most of what I had. I don't know if anyone thought I missed anything or want anything to add about the overall comic, maybe?
Well, any reason why you ended up picking that one?
No, it's actually totally random. Well, random according to Amazon's recommendation thing. I completely I admit I'm not a super fantastic comic aficionado. I definitely do not delve too much into DC and Marvel. Typically only when we're trying to read stuff or something like that. Not that I dislike them. I love a lot of the stuff they've done with the movies and things. I have not been in that place since the 90s, which I believe is considered the dark ages of comics. So that invalidates, I think, everything that I've read. So yeah,
Sean Murphy.
I actually just went straight up to Amazon recommendations. That's pretty much it.
Cool. Sean Murphy also did a favorite of mine called The Wake with Scott Snyder.
Oh yeah.
A couple of powerhouses there collaborating on what I thought was pretty epic. So
Yeah,
I'm going to have to
that was
return
really
to The
cool.
Wake.
Is there more of that coming, by the way?
They finished it. It was a 10-issue short series, and it is finished. So yeah, and what we read before was issues 1 through 5. and 6 through 10 are out now, so you can
May pop on over
have
there,
at 'em.
pick that up. That was a good read. Definitely recommend that. So yeah, I don't know. Do you want to get into questions or what's next, boss?
Well, before we do, I forgot. I'm Valen Frostweaver. Hee I forgot to introduce me.
The Weaver of all things Frost.
Yeah, I'm kind of hosting this hangout, and the Mischief of Mice Tomes and Tales Club. We're basically just a bunch of friends across the world that are fans of graphic novels getting together to discuss one that we all decided that we would enjoy watching together. Oh, now that I've got the actual intro out of the way, halfway through the episode, back to you, Steve.
All right. I'll go ahead and just get started with the question. The biggest one I thought of this whole thing was actually I got from reading an interview with Grant Morrison, and actually because at first I thought I was decidedly on one thing and then I kind of felt a little bit on the other. But is the world that Joe travels into actually a hallucination, or could it actually be real?
Hmm.
And for me, like I don't know if I'll just go ahead and answer it. For me, I thought it was pretty ambiguous. I think at first it felt very fake, and they kind of intended it to be very fake. But I think gradually throughout, it started to get this feeling that like the world that he was actually in was, it had its own, I guess, reality to it. Even if it was just created by that point or something like that, it felt like I felt more invested in it at the very least towards the end, where they're like, well, I could drink this soda, but then everyone else just, completely disappears, and, the world dies and they're done, or something like that. It's kind of what I felt towards the end. But yeah, I'm curious what other people thought about it.
I'll be happy to jump on that one, if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
So I actually am friends with several diabetics, including my mother was one, and not that I witnessed her go into one of these episodes, if you will, but I have witnessed others do so. In fact, I've seen people get into really bad situations, and I have to say, I don't think that they would be real, but they would be extremely realistic to the person experiencing. So much so that it might even be terrifying, and can easily be seen in to interact with your world and be a dual world at the same time. I've actually had conversations with people when they were first going into, I think it's called hypoglycemic shock,
Hmm.
something like that, where um, didn't it was like early warning signs were happening, and I I could see how the story lends itself to possibly have two worlds and one overlapping the other, but just from my own personal experience, it tends to make me hedge more on the aspect of the it's all in your mind, and that it's just a physical condition that's happening. Regrettably, in this case, because it's a really cool story, but yeah, that's my thought.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and play devil's advocate for that then, just for the sake of discussion. Uh, Basically, like there was one thing he said that kind of tipped off that this was actually something special, maybe not necessarily real, but at least different, was the fact that he said he's never had a problem like this before. That this specific episode was not like any of the other episodes he had had before.
Mm.
So suggesting that there's something quirky. I mean, it doesn't necessarily, make it that it was real, but it certainly lends at least some, evidence to the contrary. I don't know.
I did find the way that he transitions between worlds, though, to be like, I mean, it's such a quick transition that I felt like it lended itself more to being a hallucination. But I do agree, though, with your earlier point that there were some parts of it where, towards the end, as the story was progressing, it becomes more and more, like a real world instead of a hallucination. But it's really epic hallucination, though. You know, it's like he's got like the whole world built inside this hallucination, if it is one. So.
Well, I'll go into that. I do not have diabetes type 1, but I have passed out a fair number of times. And whenever something like that happens, I can feel it coming on, and you sort of like, I'll move to try to lay down or something like that, but then instantly it's into Technicolor dreams. And so reading this graphic novel, it was like a Technicolor dream, right? And then the things he was doing, like being in the bathtub and the water suddenly appearing in that world, like it all was so seamless in real life and his Technicolor hallucination. I felt like it was fairly realistic for how someone would feel like that. Granted, I didn't pass out and then re-pass out right after. But that kind of feeling of drifting in and out, it definitely felt realistic while reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Helen or Callisto? Anything to add?
So I kind of thought that it definitely got more real towards the end. But there were a couple scenes kind of in the middle that is what I was kind of looking for just now, where you can see the rat becomes the rat in what would be considered like real life is very attentive to him, and while rats are very intelligent, I'm not sure that a rat would jump at a vicious dog that was attacking. So it seemed to kind of merge around the middle, and then towards the end, for me, it became very real. In terms of the like hallucinated world, it became very, very real. So I thought that it definitely started out as kind of a very fake kind of thing that he was imagining, and then kind of towards the middle, when he's trying to make his way downstairs. Sorry, there's a cat in my lap. As he's trying to make his way downstairs, it becomes more real, and he kind of invests more in it, especially after Jack the rat is injured or takes on the dog. So I thought that was really interesting. It's like, to me, there was a definite turning point where you see the rat become very invested in him in the real world, and then the rat in the hallucinated world also becomes much more real, and like the hallucinated world in general becomes more developed, and he becomes more invested in it. So I thought that was a really interesting transition.
I agree.
I never really thought about whether it was real life hallucination. I just always assumed it was hallucination the whole time. Probably there was enough, I guess enough of the real world being depicted in the movie. You know, having Captain Picard without a lake at the beginning, that it just all struck to me that it was all a hallucination. I never once occurred to me that it was otherwise.
Gotcha.
I actually have something on Picard. If I don't know if you guys have looked up any pictures of Grant Morrison, but he's very much known to put himself as a character, even like a small one, inside of his own comics. And if you actually look at Grant Morrison, he looks a lot like that guy. I don't know if you can put something up, Valen, but a quick Google image search definitely shows a very...
Don't have anything prepared, but I might be able to by the end of the episode.
Now I'm like, fucking, oh.
Especially the one for his Twitter account, like, it's the very, like, you know... Yep, that's one of them. But yeah, he's definitely got that bald, big, you know, eyebrows, like very much looking like that guy.
Hold it up
So
again.
wait, who are you saying that it looks like?
Grant Morrison.
Yeah, but who?
Oh, let me see. It was on the very early pages of when he goes into the world.
Which
It's the guy who
character?
hands him the blaster.
Yeah,
He
I
looks
thought-
like a Starfleet captain.
I thought it was a broken
Oh.
hard doll.
I thought that. Oh God. I thought that was Picard. I totally thought it was Picard.
Oh yeah, me too at first. But then, like when I started reading stuff about, because I mean it looked a little bit like him, but also at the same time, like I don't know, it felt different. I don't know. Maybe it was just me, but yeah, I could be alone.
I guess I was thinking about like some of the other stuff looked just a little bit different. Yeah, I guess.
That's true. Yeah, they did definitely like make things look like not quite like they were. Like some of the Transformers look
Gotcha. Yeah.
a little bit like they are, but not quite. But I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay. So, who's next?
Next victim.
All right. Well, I'm totally gonna let's see. I'm totally gonna pick. I'm gonna pick Lisa. I want to put my wife on the spot. Hi, honey.
To come up with a question, or just to talk about something?
Yeah,
A question.
we do have a document for the questions too that we can probably link in the somewhere in here, right?
My thought, and I don't know how to phrase the question, is you talked about whether it was hallucination or whether it was real life, but I found it interesting that it kind of alluded to maybe a little bit being guided by his dead dad. Because the son kept coming out and telling him he needed to do stuff, and then he found the papers just when he needed to find them. I don't know. I thought that was. Did anyone else get that feeling out of the story?
Honestly, did anyone watch Sherlock the Abominable Bride?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Nope.
No.
I watched it yesterday, and I finished reading this yesterday, and I was like, they were like paralleled.
Huh.
In
Well, that's
a way.
good to know.
So, no spoilers, just if you think about it, oh wow. That was kind of a light bulb thing for me. And that's too bad I can't talk about it. But
I'm sorry.
once you see it, you'll hopefully know what I mean. It definitely felt that way, especially with the lost father in the picture, and then at the well, this is a spoiler for the cover. At the end, where like they have a resolution to the problem that's kind of that kind of started at the beginning and then disappears through. It's kind of a reality problem that is happening, like a reality crisis for the family.
Okay.
And then they have a resolution at the end, and so kind of. Yeah, he's having these hallucinations and these this journey that he's going on as a result of this hypoglycemic episode. But it kind of, they thread in loosely in some parts, but definitely at the end, this overarching crisis that the family's having, other than like the right on the money thing that's happening I was honestly afraid he was going to drown in that bathtub.
Yeah.
When I was just going to leave the water on, and he's just going to be in the bathtub. So there were some points like that I was really afraid for him, which I guess is good for storytelling if you really care about the characters. But I never, honestly, I think I'm with Callisto on this, I didn't ever think it was anything other than a hallucination. Probably because I read, oh, this is the most epic trip to the fridge ever, in like one of the summary things. So I kind of had that as, in the background. But anyway.
I have to say, I kind of missed half the question that she asked.
Father guide is another, instead of it just being just between the hallucination and reality, about whether or not they were hinting to the father guiding him from beyond.
Oh, gotcha. Well, what about that giant sunny face?
That's the father. That's
Yeah.
the father.
Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, the King of Death, is that what you're talking about?
No, there's two of them. There's King Death and there's the Ark Lord.
Oh, the Ark Lord's the father?
That's interesting, though. I mean, it could be either. Because like the absence of the father could easily be like, I mean, it's his death, looming over the family. I mean, right at the beginning, he's like, "Screw you, Dad!" Like while he's sitting there in the cemetery, which you don't even know that he's dead at this point. But like, they're already hating on him. But then you kind of find out later that he had an unfortunate incident at a war. Yeah, yep.
Well, towards the end of the book, there's actually a coat on a throne, on a chair that resembles the undead skeleton sitting on the throne, and I think that that is representative physically of death, but I think that that character was more portrayed by his immediate situation and his spiral into hypoglycemia. Um, but the relationship with the father, I think it was more or less the Sunny Arc Lord, whatever you said his name was, that was at the beginning, was representative of what he wants his father to be deep down, but doesn't realize it and doesn't understand, at least not until later. Just my thoughts. I see everybody frantically looking for the book now.
Yep.
Oh no,
I'm trying to find actually the jacket on the chair. Like I'm totally missing
that's what I
this.
was trying to find, but then I found this part where it says, this is the voice of your father, or listen to the voice of your father.
Okay, so that's the
Oh yeah, okay, maybe that's a little bit more overt.
And that was the Ark of Light, or the right? That was the Ark.
I can't remember his name.
Oh, that was the Ark Lord.
Ark.
Yeah.
That's right.
Arc
Now
Lord.
I have a question on the father-son thing. Throughout the entire deal, like pretty early on, they run into this Prince of Pirates, or King of Pirates, and his giant son Smoot, who's like, okay. So I think they're called the Dwarves or something like that.
I think Dwarren.
Yeah.
I think they're called Dwarren.
Dwarren. Okay, so they're these like pirates that are it's especially in the bathtub time when he's running cold water on his face. So he runs into these dwarves, and then there's this father-son dynamic, or the king of the pirates and his giant son who always seems to run into stuff, or he's just too big to be allowed. do you think that had any sort of relevance to the son, the kid who's having this dream at all? Because they bring it up a lot. This and the mother is all about his son best, and he's gonna do so well. But the father's just kind of like,
Well, I have to say, I think it might actually represent something that he thinks about his own family that he's projecting onto others. Because I think Smoot is represented by like one of the bullies.
One of the bullies, yeah.
Yep.
Which, strangely enough, I missed that entire chapter when I read it, and when I went back through it, I caught it again, and everything suddenly made sense. But that being said, the I think that he was projecting his kind of situation a little bit. I mean, in the Warren King ended up getting stuck in, what was it, crab season feeding grounds until next year or something. It was kind kind of ridiculous. But he was always not happy with his son and everything. So I think that's a fair point that he was possibly projecting it. I guess. I mean, because he doesn't really know anything about this bully as far as we know. Just a thought.
It just seemed, I don't know, because of the number of times they brought it up, and Scoot always feeling like he didn't fit in, but then suddenly when they're on this adventure, he's like, oh wait, I'm not just the only big kid in the world. I'm actually normal sized, and everybody else in the dwarf world is small. So I don't know. Probably, I guess the reason it stuck out to me was it was mentioned so many times.
Right. How about you, Helen? I see you still looking.
I was looking back through because I was trying to think, like, in the beginning when it first starts, you kind of get the sense that Joe is a little bit of a screw-up, or at least that's kind of the sense that I got. Mm-hmm. And if the giant kid and the dwarf father are actually a representation of him, then it kind of makes sense, right? Because Joe seems to be thinking of himself as a screw-up, at least as far as his mom's concerned. And that's kind of what I got. I could be reading that wrong. Mm-hmm. And then the father being a dwarf, but being really fierce, I kind of, like, if we're looking at it that way, then I guess I would interpret it that as, like, the lack of the presence of the father now, and how little he may have been involved in Joe's life before. Because if he was active military for most of Joe's life, then he probably wasn't around much if he was constantly deployed. But he was this fierce warrior. So it's kind of, like, I definitely see the mirror between the two, but that wasn't how I read it the first time around.
Mm. Yeah, there's definitely something prevalent there. I mean, but I think it also might be something that they're trying to develop that character a little bit. Otherwise, he's just kind of this fumbling kid. I mean, if your both parents are all supportive and everything, and you're still fumbling, then, well, I mean, there's not as much conflict in there. So I feel without the conflict with his parents, that character would have been less interesting. He wasn't really that interesting to me as it was, but I do see how it could be related. Joe to that family in the fantasy world of Smoot. How about you, Kashmir?
So maybe I'm misunderstanding what you guys are saying, but I assumed Smoot was like just directly taken from. So this goes back to, like, is it hallucination or is it real world kind of thing? Because I was thinking it was hallucination, so I was thinking Smoot was like part of Joe's reality that he sucked into this hallucination, along with, like, a lot of other parts, like Jack, except Jack's name isn't Jack in the hallucination, so he's got, like, all these bits and pieces that he's brought into his hallucinatory world. And I thought Smoot was just a part of that, and Smoot was actually the bully. Is that what you guys are saying? And I'm just totally...
Well, I think there's a couple of points of view that are kind of being thrown out. Like, one is the bully, and the other is, like, is this a representation of his relationship with his family and how he feels about himself? Like, does he feel like a bumbling idiot? His mom definitely doesn't, make him seem like he's incapable of taking care of himself, as she's, like, pointing out all these things. But he's also being a little bit, like, like I'd say distant or cold, like, like, whatever, like, I could care less about you, Mom, okay, sort of deal.
I mean, I guess I didn't think of him as being that much of a screw-up either. To me, he just seemed like a regular teenage boy who's not fitting in particularly well with, like, the cliques within school, and which I can totally relate to. So it's just like, yeah, he's not a screw up, because if he was a screw up, then that probably means that I was a screw up, and I totally wasn't a screw up. So I totally took that personally, and decided that Joe was in fact awesome, and so I didn't think he was a screw up. Though I thought that he was just like a regular kind of kid going through like that where do I fit in the world kind of thing, and totally understandably, because he's lost his dad fairly recently. I mean, his mom and the person that his mom's going to meet, that was a lawyer, right, or something like that.
Some sort of lawyer or person involved in getting their house back.
Yeah. So both of them refer to the visit to the veteran cemetery as being macabre. So his father's death seems to be fairly recent. So I didn't think he was a screw up. I thought he was just a kid dealing with the hand that he had at the moment.
Okay.
And I can't remember where I was going with that originally.
I think we've taken this question and kind of twisted it and turned it and all over the place. Anything to do with a father figure, and then going in with Smoot.
Yeah, so it's going back in Smoot. So I didn't think Joe was a screw up, so therefore I didn't see Smoot as being a representation of him. I saw Smoot as being a representation of the bully, who Joe actually might see as a bumbling idiot.
That's a fair point too.
Now the girl that picks up his stuff some of his stuff that the bullies threw out, and she actually says, "Oh, you did a good job on this picture," kind of thing. She ends up being one of the people with the skull masks. She's the one ship, or the flying contraption thing. It looked like the World of Warcraft Orgrimmar ship, or whatever. I think she ends up. So he seems to be picking people that he's seen recently, like within the last day, to represent parts of his dream.
Actually, Grant Morrison actually referred to them as the ADD inventors. Was what he referred to them as during this interview that I read. It was really good.
Although I didn't feel like the girl's character was very well fleshed out.
Nope.
Compared to Smoot.
You didn't get as much backstory for her.
I think hers was a quick overcome, though. Just like she overcame her obstacle quickly, and boop, there you go. She was just trying to support Joe the whole time, and I guess that's just the impression that she gave off originally. I mean, she only met.
Are we talking about the real one, or are we talking about the story one?
The story one, and the real one.
The real one was not developed at all. Like she was like, I picked up books, and the fictional one was developed.
But she also was one of the ones that said, oh, I think you could like do this professionally. You're really good at this, And then she seemed to kind of look after him as he's walking away or something. So she had kind of an interest in him in some way, but it was so minor that I think that was all that we had to go on. And that's kind of how her character ended up being in the fantasy world. Is she had an interest in supporting Joe, but that was about it.
Right, and Joe was being kind of a jerk. Like, he was just like, whatever. I'm going to go cry about this right now.
No, I think he just wanted a soda.
I think he's just dealing with grief and the crappy thing that he might get booted out of his house, so he's not going to be a happy kid,
Right.
That's true. That's a fair point. I just thought, I don't know, being, like, I mean, what does he basically do? He's just like, what does he say to her? No, I guess he just kind of ignores her and walks away.
Yeah.
He's a little emo.
Yeah, he is a little bit. But he talks about stereotypes in town.
Yep.
Let's continue on with this, and we'll say Callisto. Who's going to be asking the next question?
Ellen.
Helen, it is.
I did put a link to the doc. Should you feel inclined to click that through the chat window on the right.
I guess I was talking about all these different smaller characters. I was just thinking about, who my favorite character was, and if you guys had any, other than obviously Joe and Jack. I think for me, the most interesting was his mom, and how she translates into the dream world as that queen, whose name I'm struggling to find.
I think it's Queen Bree.
Queen Bree, yeah.
Yeah.
So how she translates into this queen that's basically just accepting darkness rolling in and taking over their world, and how she sends out her last guards eventually, but she's just kind of trying to hold on and trying to keep things together. And it's only when Jack finally steps up that Joe is able to bring back the light. I thought that was just really interesting, talking about grief and talking about dealing with change and things that are uncomfortable as a teenager, and how his subconscious mind in this hallucination makes his mom this royal figure who's really struggling and really just closed herself off to so much while she's trying to go over and deal with what's happening, that her kingdom is actually suffering. But I thought that she was a really interesting character for me. Do you guys have any favorites?
It's really tough not to say Jack.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing, though. It's a credit to the book. But strangely enough, I actually really liked Zixi, the fantasy version of the girl that showed interest that had absolutely no background or history, if only because I liked how her character looked in the fantasy world. I thought that she pulled off that steampunk look really good. I was just like, that looks awesome. And so I'm like hoping that they're developing this character throughout the whole story. And it's like, oh, okay, they really didn't do much with it, but she looked really cool. So.
Maybe she wins the medal for character with the most undeveloped potential. She
was pretty steadfast at the very least. She started out with some strong qualities. Like she was like, no, I'm not a coward like you other jerks. Like I'm gonna, actually help and try and save the world.
Right.
Though, admittedly, the way they were cowardly, the other inventors was actually pretty hilarious. I remember really enjoying that part. Like they were just like, yeah, we like to play the role of cowards. Look, they wouldn't even bother us. We're cowards.
I actually caught myself literally laughing out loud when I was reading that, and they were very entertaining. I really liked the cowardly castle.
I have to pick somebody that isn't Jack. That's really difficult.
Well, you can pick Jack. Just explain why you picked Jack.
I don't think it requires an explanation. Just read the book. He's clearly the most awesome character.
I did enjoy Jack, the character of Jack as well. He had a couple flip sides to him, but I did like it.
I liked how Jack kind of started off cold, all like, and we're done with this rescue thing, that I was just, thanks for letting me out of the cage, I return the favor now, off you go kind of thing, and just total indifference at that point. And then later how his relationship with Joe develops, and he becomes very protective of him, and I just liked watching that kind of unfold, Jack's heart, was kind of won over by Joe, which I thought was quite nice.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
Nice little warm fuzzy.
Yeah, there was a lot of character development from that, because you're right, at the beginning he was relying on Jack to detect him, and then by the end it was kind of the other way around. Jack was trying to protect Jack. So, yes? No?
Bueller.
So check on Jack being the the favorite character, Jack combo. No, I actually really did like 62. Just was the steadfast, we will win, we will do things, we will, win the day if we keep going and stuff like that. She kept Smoot going. She kept, she even, I maybe even inspired the cowards to come out, the AD inventors.
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't remember if they came back at the end or something. Yeah, they started blowing lasers at everybody at some point. It was pretty awesome.
There was a lot going on in this book.
Yes, but lasers are cool.
How about you, Lilac at Sea or Callisto?
I think I have to go with Helen on this one with the Queen Bree. She, once you get to that part, it's kind of a little like you've had a fair bit of the journey until then, and then it's almost like a stall. And like, where are they going to go? And you can sort of, with the overall storyline, you can kind of predict where he's going. So before they start the hallucination, you get a little bit of the layout of the house as he's going up to his room. And then when he's in his room, instead of just looking at him in his bed, they actually do a pan-out shot where you can see all the toys and stuff in the foreground, and then his bed. So as he's going through this hallucination, you can kind of see where he is in the house in, respect to where he's going. But when he's in this Queen Bree area, I felt like I didn't know exactly where he was and how far he had to go. So the fact of the matter that it stalled, the story stalled a little bit there. It was like indecision. Was very tense for me, and her character really was a big part of that. So, but probably the most interesting part for me.
The way I interpreted that section was the fact that he was in front of the fireplace in the real world. Basically, he had found this place of warmth and some security, but ultimately wasn't the place to solve his immediate issue. But there was some false hope with it, going on there. That kind of created that limbo you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Callisto? Who is your favorite?
Probably the same one everyone else seemed to really like is the girl. She didn't have much background in the real world, but I liked her character and how she was very much a go-getter, and I'm going to go save everyone.
Very positive character.
As a side note, I really love the fortune-telling fish.
Does anybody know the song that they were actually trying to sing the fortunes to? I was trying to place it, but I couldn't get it from the badums that they were doing.
Nope. I tried, and I failed.
Well, if they're making it into a movie, then just you can just wait and find out.
All right, Helen, who's the next questioner?
I'm gonna go with Lilac SC.
Okay.
All right.
How did you feel about the house as a character?
That's a good question.
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah. I liked that they did, as I mentioned before, that they gave you a little bit of the layout of the house, because you could connect without even having the flash to reality or not. Like when they got to for instance, when they got to the part with the what did they call it? The Institute of Discovery or something like that. It was like, oh, they're collecting batteries, and one guy is holding up a CD, and it's like, oh, they must be in his backpack, and you kind of think in your head, back, and they're like teaching and stuff, so he probably has his school books in there, And the things that connected him to certain parts of the house, it was fun to pick up on the little clues through as he was moving downstairs. So actually, my favorite character is probably the house.
Yeah, that was actually. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, after you.
Oh, I'll give a little bit of context. That was actually part of the big part of the story was the house, and that that beginning part was very purposeful. Apparently, what Grant Morrison did was give Sean Murphy the sort of the idea, and then Sean Murphy actually did kind of like a detailed architecture layout of the actual house, and then the story was written from there and not like the other way around, which I thought was actually pretty cool. Like that that character was ultimately completely designed by the illustrator with just a little bit of guidance from the author. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is really cool.
And it was a cool house.
I was going to say, I want this kid's room.
Yeah, I mean, he had a floating train station suspended from the ceiling.
I know. And the only way in was like a rope ladder as well.
I thought it was really, really cool.
That's the page I was looking at as well. Yeah, just like the whole. He's got like this fireplace bit and the skylights and.
The skylights are, yeah.
And tons of space as well.
Mm-hmm.
I did actually. When I did my first read through and totally missed the beginning, I ended up skipping the part where I think the last part I remember was he was sitting at his father's grave calling him a jerk, and then it jumped to and I somehow missed like 4 or 5 pages, and it was like he went into his hallucination at that point, like he was crashing in bed. So I missed the entire walk up into the house. I missed all the bullies, everything like that. So I didn't get the layout of the house. I was like, how freaking big is this house as I'm reading through the first time. And then when I went back through, I was like, oh my god, I missed like 4 or 5 pages. But at the very end of the volume, there was all these little drawings and stuff that I think Steve was talking about with the plot and the plan out of the entire adventure through the house, like the route that he takes, each floor's contents and layout, plus the fantastic bedroom that this kid has, which is technically just the attic, but I mean, crying out loud, sweet attic, you know.
Best attic I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I absolutely loved it. I mean, the whole idea was wonderful. They planned out something and drew all these images for things that you would never actually see in the book, but just to make it that much better, so that it was a well-told story and not just, well, we're going to tack on a room over here in volume or in episode number 6, you know, because they didn't plan out that there would be or they wanted something darker or something, you know. Instead, no, they did an entire house plan layout. I thought that was awesome.
I think you need it though, because the house, like Lilac said, is the house as a character is such an integral part of the book and what's happening to Joe that you absolutely have to have like an idea of where he's going and what he's doing as he moves through the story.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me.
Yeah, there is like a couple of pages in the back of volume 1 where it talks about the house and the world, and it's got, yeah, exactly like you said, a floor plan of the house itself.
And it kind of shows you what they stand to lose. And, you know, having those familiar surroundings in that awesome house, that's another big crisis in his life.
I have to say, I kind of got lost in the whole passion for the house. What was your question again?
How do you feel about the house as a character?
What did you think of the house?
Oh, yeah. As a character, that was it. Okay. Yeah, I thought it was epic, and actually, now that I'm thinking about it as a character, it's definitely my favorite. Though I don't know if it's really worth saving after all the crap that he does to it throughout the entire novel. But it's like, wow, you're flooding the house. And when he was by the fire, I'm like, dear God, he's going to burn the place down.
Oh, yeah.
No. Oh. And then he goes into the basement and the stairway collapses.
Yeah.
I mean, dear God, what more could this kid do to the place besides blowing it up? Well, maybe that's in the next episode. I don't know.
So,
I think this is standalone, by the way.
What's that?
It's a standalone.
yeah.
Oh, cool.
There's no more. This is not. There's no more volumes of this, as far as I know. This is meant to be like a start to finish sort of deal.
Excellent.
Self-contained.
But I think the house was totally essential to make the story worthwhile. I think without the house, like, playing such a big part in it, it would have been half the story that it was.
I agree. What do you think, Helen and Callisto?
I definitely think that the house was just a phenomenal character. I mean, the design of it was fantastic. The different rooms that they showed in reality and how it transitioned into the hallucination was just wonderful. And bless you. I thought that the names that they gave stuff in the fantasy world, like he's clearly going down the hallway and they're calling it like Yalloway or something like that. I thought those were very, very clever, and I thoroughly enjoyed all the little details that they laid in there just to kind of make it a little bit more of like an epic world that he was traveling through that was still the house, but the cities and towns had their own names, but they were reflective of where he was in the house and the little details, like pulling the CDs out of his backpack and stuff like that. I thought it was just, it rounded it out and made it a much more epic story for me than just like a, like I think if it hadn't been there, the story would have fallen a little flat, and it wouldn't have been so detailed and so imaginative.
Okay. Callisto?
I didn't really, until you said something, I didn't really think about it much of a character, but I definitely thought of it as a dangerous world. I kept waiting for him to drown himself in the tub or the rat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like really kind of freaked out about that. But I missed a lot of these little things because I kind of didn't really get into the book in about at least 2/3 or more into it. I was really kind of like rushing through it. I was like, oh my god, this is like hard for me to read. Until of course Steve pointed out that it is very much reminiscent of the Alice in Wonderland type thing, which is, I don't know how many of you know that, I hate Alice in Wonderland.
Oh dear.
So, and I recall us having a discussion like that in another comic, in another place, but and I remember hating that one as well. So I didn't hate this book. I liked the last like third of it. Did not like the first 2/3.
Okay.
I have another question.
Go for it.
What was your favorite link between reality and the hallucination? And I can start as like an example. My favorite link between reality and the hallucination is when they're showing him the prophecy of the dying boy, and it ends up being him looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
But it's not a picture, and I was like,
Wow.
oh, that's really cool. That was pretty good.
I totally missed that. Well, yeah, I totally missed it. That's awesome.
But, I mean, what did you have a particular kind of side-by-side reality hallucination thing that you enjoyed?
I really loved the waterfalls when he was going downstairs and the water was running, and it took me a second to like realize that's what it was. But then once I did, I was like, oh, that was nice. I like that. I thought the waterfalls were really, really great, and especially like the fantasy world version, not just the water running down nice hardwood stairs. That was kind of depressing.
Yeah.
But like I don't know, there was just something about the design of the waterfalls, which I'm currently trying to find, and failing. But it was kind of like jungly and like deserty at the same time. Oh, here we go. So you can see there's like cool little plants, and then there's the waterfall going down the rocks, and I just thought that was really nice. And then Jack has a moment at the edge of it, but it's that to me, and like going down the stairs and realizing that he's flooding the entire house. I was like, oh, okay.
I liked the fountain part, where it's almost to the end of the story where he's trying to get a soda. He's like finally at the fridge, and I'm like, yes, he made it! Just grab it! Drink the soda! And they've got like this old school kind of, like in the hallucinatory world, they've got an old school kind of soda fountain. It's giant size, and Smoot is like struggling with the faucet, and they're trying to make it work. And that's probably my favorite.
The fountain of life.
Yeah, pretty much. It was pretty cool.
Steve, Callisto?
Yeah, definitely people pick a lot of the ones that I like. Definitely the water was fantastic. But I'm gonna go with the child in me on this one, and the toys coming to life. Like, I mean, that was just always like a thing when you were a kid. You're like, oh, this would be so awesome if all these were real, and I wasn't just smashing these two things of plastic together. Like, you know. Yeah, no, I loved like the idea of like having like all your toys sort of, you know, come to life and be like, you know, this army that's on your side, and other things like that. Yeah, mine's like totally childish, but yeah, no, I like that idea.
I could support that.
It was actually one of the early hooks, you know, that I was like, okay, this is going to be cool. Because, you know, when you see like that array of toys, and then you see the same array of toys in the hallucinatory world, that's pretty sweet.
I've got Transformers and Batman on my side. I got this.
I did like it when Batman's head popped off.
Oh, yeah, that was bad.
That was good stuff.
So was that your favorite reflection of Batman's head?
My favorite reflection was the Iron Knight that he was starting to draw on the first page or so, that he had drawn for his father as well. And it was like a recurring theme of some kind of lost hero. And I really liked, I just thought it looked really cool, but I really did enjoy that. But I also have to say I really liked the idea that looking at the end, I don't have the book to look up the picture, but the throne with the coat on it, and it looks just like the
Draw the book.
you know. Fail.
Now he's taking the book. It'd be useless answering any further questions.
So yeah, I'm going to say, hey Callisto, what was your favorite? And I clicked on you.
It's toss up between the mirror scene and the scene with him sitting for fire. He kept trying to huddle next to the warmth and not leave the light. And that was sort of
Couldn't quite hear that one. Sorry, could you speak up a little bit?
the mirror and him sitting in front of the fire.
Oh. Yes, very good ones. Very good ones. But especially since the fire ended up having such danger potential for me.
Oh yes.
All right.
Well, his head. I mean, I've never gotten that far hypoglycemic, but you know, I have problems with that, and you become like you're like staring out, like into the world, like you're not really even there. You're just kind of going through motions. You don't know what's going on. You get kind of like, because a friend of mine who always knew my signs, she would just be like, "You got to eat something." I'm like, no, I'm fine. No, I'm fine. And I would just keep insisting, "No, I'm fine," until she would sit me down and make me eat. Yeah. So I could see him wanting to just, "No, I'm fine. This is good." Cuddling next to the fire. It's good.
Well, let's see if I can actually. I think I found the page here where. There we go. We've got the coat on the chair here, and throughout we've got the throne, which actually I think it's on the previous page. You've got Beth sitting there. No, maybe it's a few pages back. But that was the whole idea of either death or the coat guys that were constantly attacking them. But I really did like that. It was kind of a aha moment when I saw that picture, and I was like, oh, okay, it's just a shadow in the dark. Something when you're younger tends to affect you a bit more than when you're older. Any shadow can turn into any kind of monster. So that would kind of be mine. Oh.
Did anybody wonder where the fire came from?
It's a really good point.
It was always burning. That's why it was going to go out.
When it got to that part, I was like, wait a minute. Because you see him leave the door open. You see him leave his backpack. You see him do all these things. But you never see him light that fire. Where'd that come from?
That made me wonder if it was just one of those like Insta-Light gas fires or something. You just push a button or something. It could have been.
Oh.
So there's my theory. Rolling your eyes at me.
So little hang-up thing was I couldn't solve that in my mind.
All right, so I lost track. Who hasn't asked a question yet? I know I haven't.
I don't think I have, unfortunately.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's the two of you.
Lilac, who are you picking?
Oh, Valen. Since you're on the screen.
God damn it.
Save the best for last. All right. So I am going to do a really short question at the end, but otherwise, my question is, which was the better story for you if you were to divide the fantasy and the reality in half? For me, I actually have to say it was the reality, and let me explain why. The fantasy, while extremely entertaining, I felt was very diversionary, and the whole time the kid is just trying to get back to reality, which is where the urgency was and what drove a lot of the passion in this story for me was the fact that he just needed to get out of this hyperglycemia that he was getting into and get to that darn soda, which was, and it kept on saying miles and miles away. It literally was forever away by the time he finally got down to the kitchen. But I mean, it just seemed like that was the real driving force for urgency. If the entire novel was in the fantasy realm for me, I think it would have been not as entertaining because it just seemed like a mishmash of a bunch of stuff. But I find, I don't know, I really enjoyed the reality better, but I found the fantasy to be refreshing at the same time.
No, totally fantasy. Sorry. Reality, he was going to the fridge. Yes, he stopped like at the bathroom and almost drowned himself. Maybe he had like a couple of moments by the fire after crawling down the stairs, but in reality was he was going to the fridge.
did he crawl down the stairs or did he fall down the stairs? There was a
Right.
lot of falling and flying in
But yeah.
there.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I gotta go with Kashka on this one. I definitely enjoyed the fantasy. I wholeheartedly agree that they're like completely inseparable. Like the motivation behind the fantasy world is like, definitely his real life struggle, which, gave a lot of the fantasy meaning, and it allowed you to actually feel for, Joe. But the fantasy was really what, like, made the book so engrossing and made that trip epic by like which would have been ordinarily mundane, which is what I think really the author and artists were going for.
Hmm. How about...
Yeah, I'm with Kashka, and sorry.
Don't get me wrong. It would have been not as good of a story without the fantasy, but I felt that the reality was just that much more driving and interesting.
Nobody wants to hear it, Fallon.
But
Let's see, is there anybody else who was on the reality side?
Lilac?
I'm so desperate.
Well, reading it, I don't think I could. I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much if it were one or the other by itself.
I agree.
That's a good point.
They're pretty much inseparable. But when it came to the parts that were reality versus fantasy, like which part I liked the most, I'm gonna give an example. I did tend to enjoy the parts in the fantasy more, and my favorite part that kind of shows this example is when the dog comes in and is threatening, like growling, and Jack is in in between Joe's feet, and Joe's standing there, and I think the dog's actually growling at Jack. Mm-hmm. But in his fantasy, Jack is standing in front of him like as a shield, like protecting him. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of I don't know quite how to describe it. Like that was a very sad situation.
It
because
was.
you know how it's going to end.
Yes.
Right in the field.
Right, and it gave it more meaning and more feeling in the fantasy world, especially that leaping part. So instead of the rat jumping and running away, he was leaping to, escape the dog, which now in the fantasy world has like flames and horns and stuff on it, and he's jumping, and even though it was on the same page, I was still like, when they showed, like, in the book, it is a little bit of a spoiler, but Jack is jumping, and then the dog's, mouth goes on him, and instead of that just being, oh my god, it was a dog going after a rat, and, duh, that would happen, it was, Jack was protecting him, and this hero's,
Yeah, I kind of personalized the reality part of it with Jack being his closest friend and pet. Mm-hmm. And I therefore projected one of my pets.
Are you gonna pick a favorite now?
No. Into that position, and it was just the idea of one of them being attacked by a really large dog and being chomped like that. If they were that small, how they would probably end up being killed. And I was like, no! And then it went to the fantasy part, and I was like, what the Robo-Dog, what? That just kind of brought me back out of the feels that I was getting. So I had the opposite effect on me going into the fantasy, and that's why I liked the other slightly more. Sorry, just justifying my decision.
You should be sorry. Apologize.
Well, Alan, you have me on your side. Yeah, no, the fantasy part, I didn't have any feels at all when the rat, went after the dog. But the minute I saw that and thought, oh my God, what's going to happen in real life, and I turned the page. I mean, Steve was sitting on the couch when I read that part, and I was like, oh. I was like, oh no, the real rat's gonna get hurt.
I know. All right, I don't feel too bad now. Thank you, Callisto. You're the best. All right, Kashka, I choose you.
I think I'm gonna steal what I think you were gonna ask, and well, I guess because it's a standalone, I'm gonna need to phrase it a little differently. I mean, usually we ask like, would you continue the series? Like, would you read volume 2? As this is a standalone, I can't ask that, but I will ask. Would you recommend it overall? Is this like a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Okay, why don't you go first?
I would say thumbs up overall. I had a really tough time with it at the beginning. I found the transitions between reality and the hallucinatory world to be too jarring, actually, and kind of broke my immersion in the book a little bit. But I think about a third of the way in, I really got into it and picked up steam, and I would definitely recommend it.
All right.
Neutral. I liked part of it, but not all of it. So I give it like a thumb sideways.
If you were to find out that there was a volume 2, would you consider purchasing that?
Probably not, because the first thing that goes through my head is that poor kid. Isn't his mom taking care of him? Why does he keep having his
Eat your damn candy.
Yeah. Well, and why would you be giving your diabetic kid candy if you keep them on a... I didn't really think the mother was very good at parenting, so I can go into all kinds of issues. But yeah, no, probably not.
Okay. I'm going to say I did like it a lot. It was a little bit to get used to at the beginning, but once I figured it out, which I think some people have also mentioned that it was a little bit more of a challenge at the beginning, but I think that they couldn't have really done it much better to make it easier. But I would get a second volume. I did enjoy it quite a bit, and it wasn't brought up in any of the questions, but I have to say I really loved the artwork. It was fantastic. Big thumbs up on that. I mean, there are some art styles that I still like a little bit better, but that was really good stuff. Really good stuff. I'd say the only thing I really didn't care about it is that this might be a bit of a spoiler, so anybody that's not wanting to get a spoiler, because this is right at the end, don't listen to my next statement. I was really unhappy with the fact that everything turned out right. It was like he had this epic win at the end. I mean, it was great that he found this paper from his father, and that like kind of made everything right. And then also the mansion thing, and then he was like, "I've got everything set," and it's like he could have done without the Power Ranger pose or something. Wow.
How does that go again?
No. No. But I could have done without the Power Ranger pose at the end, otherwise, yeah, I thought it was a great and epic tale, and I really enjoyed it. So who's next?
I'll go next.
Oh, go for it.
All right.
Oh, two thumbs.
Thumbs up.
This book was fantastic. The first page, I was like looped in. I think because I read that little excerpt, most epic journey to the fridge. I was like, oh man, this is probably going to be pretty cool. And then, starting out, I was immediately drawn in by the art and the story, and I was just like raring to go. And the story, I felt like ended well for a limited series. Like everything sort of was resolved, and it was just an overall great story. I'm actually sending it off to my dad, who's a nutritionist, to read. Because he has a professional interest in diabetes. So it was fantastic. I really, really liked it. Thanks for the the choice.
Good pick.
You're very welcome. Amazon. I'll send that along to Amazon.
So how about you, Steve?
Yeah, I would give it overall a thumbs up. I was a little bit with Kalisto on like the fact that the beginning, like I was a little bit into it, but not as much. It definitely took a little time for me to really like get invested in it, especially when they started calling into question the reality of that like hallucination. That really grabbed it for me. Hence my earlier question, but. Definitely a thumbs up overall. The art was definitely fantastic. Love to see more by Sean Murphy. And I'm gonna have to go pick up that next volume of The Wake. Definitely. But yeah, +1 would recommend.
All right, and I think that leaves Helen.
I really enjoyed it. I passed it along to Adam, my fiance, for those of you who don't know. And he read it and gives it a thumbs up.
It's a graphic novelist as well, so.
I think both of us definitely enjoyed it. I will agree with some of the other people that have suggested this, but the beginning for me was a little rough. I wasn't sure what to make of it. I wasn't sure how invested I could get in the characters because there wasn't really much that I don't know. It's not that I couldn't identify with them. It's just that he was such a teenager.
Yep.
He was so grumpy. And I get that his dad has probably recently died and all that kind of stuff, but there's one face that he makes which adequately sums up what.
There we go.
Not face. He's just like, oh, I hate life. Yeah, his life does suck right now, but I saw that and I was like, wow, he's having a rough time.
Right.
But yeah, I really enjoyed it by the end. I definitely thought it was a really fantastic story. I wouldn't have liked it if it didn't have the reality mixed in with the fantasy. It wouldn't have been a strong enough story for me. But the two combined gave it something really special, I think. And yeah, the only thing I will say is that the end was very neat. Everything tied up together very, very well. And I think as well, since I didn't really take the father as a character throughout the book, it seemed kind of like a left field thing where I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. You've got papers for the house and you're hearing your dad's voice again. Cool. But it just seemed kind of like it was out of left field for me. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I thought it was a really fantastic novel. I am a little curious as to how they got away with including the other superheroes in it as artwork.
Yeah.
Superman, Batman, Robin, Picard, Worf was in there too, by the way.
This is in Vertigo, which is owned by DC, and Grant Morrison also has done plenty of work for DC, so I assume that they just kind of like, yeah, you did right by us, so there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably why.
So the other thing, I don't know if you guys could help me with this, and I've been looking for it for a little while now, but at some point, in the beginning, he acquires a blaster in the imaginary world, but then he has it in reality as well. I guess that it's a toy. I mean,
yeah, actually,
that's fine, but I don't think
was asked by Kashka as well. She had brought it up that you saw it hanging in the background, and the only thought I had was that perhaps he had a toy gun as well. I mean, he's actually wearing it
Yeah.
in the basement when he's in reality. So I guess he's got like, or perhaps it's something that he was able to bring over from the other side, and therefore the two worlds do exist.
Because you never actually see him put it on in reality. And like midway through the book, I noticed that in the reality scenes he's got it on, and I was like, well, where did that come from? And that seemed kind of random. And then he's wearing it at the very end as well, when he's doing his victorious everything is right in the world pose. So yeah, but I thought it was really great. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought the characters, for the most part, were really well developed. There were a couple more that could have been, fleshed out a little bit more, but I would recommend it.
So is that everybody? Did I get everyone? All right. Okay, so unless anybody else has anything else, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope everybody enjoyed our review of Joe the Barbarian. That's this kid here, even though his rat is actually called the Barbarian, he is the Barbarian of the series. Let's put that on here. There we go. It looks like 5 out of 6 agree. This is the book for you. Yeah, well, 5.5 out of 6, I should say. And if you guys tune in next time, we should be covering Rat Queens, Volume 1, which I know is is going to be well received by the group, if I'm not mistaken. So, until next time, I hope you all have a good time, and we'll see you later. Bye.
See ya.